Hello instructors, Bob Emick here. We're going to talk about the inspection of our air brake system. The students have already had the lesson on the maintenance and inspection section, and now we're going to use this video for you instructors to see how we inspect our air brake system. We're using the New York State Commercial Driver's Manual, the CDL manual, Section 5, air brake system. From there, in your handouts, in your instructor material, you're going to find a instructor handout that also can go to the students, and the student handout on the steps required to inspect our air brake system. So we want to do it in the classroom, and then we're going to go out and do it hands-on to show the students the importance of inspecting our air brake system appropriately per the New York State CDL manual. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we have our wheels chocked appropriately. We're going to put our apparatus on a flat ground so it does not move. We're going to be taking off the parking brake, so we want to make sure our wheels are chocked appropriately. Okay, we're now sitting in the cab and starting our inspection of our air brake system. We're going to go step by step on the handout that the students and you have. So step one is the engine compartment check. That'll be covered in the second part, the inspection of the under the hood and under the apparatus. The walk around inspection, step two, will also be covered in the second video. So we're going to start with step three, testing the low pressure warning signal. So here we have our gauges. We're going to shut the engine off when we've got the air pressure built up to its operating pressure. We have to leave the electrical power on so we can pump down the brakes so that our audible and visual indicators will come on. So even though at this point we've got our parking brakes on, please remember we have chocked the wheels and we're on flat ground. So we've got the engine power on. I'm going to step on and off the brake pedal to reduce our air tank pressure. What we are now doing is pumping our brakes down to see if our low air alarm is going to come on. And if you look at your approximately 60 psi. So if we look at our gauges, we're going to be approximately 60 psi, and our low air, both visual and audio alarm, have now come on. The important thing for the students to recognize throughout this is we are now losing air pressure. If we were driving down the road and this is happening, we have a problem with air pressure in our system. At this time, we would tell the students to make sure they pull their engine over to a safe area and prepare, because the spring brakes are going to come on. So step 4 is check our spring brakes. So we're going to continue to pump on and off our air brakes to make sure that our spring brake comes on, and that's going to come on at approximately 20 to 45 psi depending on your manufacturer's specifications. And if you'll notice, we have two separate gauges here, so both of those gauges are pretty much going to have to get down to that pressure, and our spring brakes will pop on. And there it was, our spring brake, our parking brake, just popped on. And we were approximately just below that 35-40 pounds on both brakes, both gauges. So at this point, if we were driving down the road, our spring brakes would have popped on, and without air pressure, we cannot release them. So we are coming to a halt, and we're not going to be able to move the apparatus. So that was the check to check for our spring brakes. That was number 4. So So at this point, we're going to move on to step number 5. We're going to check the rate of air pressure buildup. We're going to turn the engine on, and the pressure is going to build up from 85 to 100, and we're going to time it, and within 45 seconds that dual air system should build up. If the vehicle has larger than minimum size air tanks, the buildup could take longer. Check your manufacturer specifications. So right now we're building up our air pressure to 85 psi. We now have both tanks built up to 85 psi. At this time, we're going to start our timer, and within 45 seconds, we should reach 100 psi. And if the air pressure does not build fast enough, your pressure may drop too low during driving, requiring an emergency stop. So if you reach or have a problem with this, building up not fast enough, it's time to take the apparatus out of service and have it checked by a authorized mechanic. So we have now reached 100 psi, and that was 32 seconds. So our compressor buildup, or our engine air pressure buildup, is working within specs. We are now on step 6. We're going to test our air leakage rate. With a fully charged air system, so we're up to 100, 120, 125 psi, and our compressor is stopped filling the air tanks. We're now going to shut off the engine, release the parking brake, and again our wheels are chocked. Release our parking brake, and time the pressure drop. We're going to take a look at our gauges once it equalizes, and we're going to turn our timer on. We are going to time for 1 minute, and we're looking for a 2 psi drop in 1 minute. So what we're doing right now is checking the leakage rate throughout the entire air system. So I'm looking at the gauge. And again, our wheels, our spring brakes are off, so our wheels are chocked and we're in a safe area. I'm watching the gauges. It's been 1 minute and the pressure has not dropped, so that test will be passed. The second part of our test is we're now going to put our service brakes on, apply pressure, and our PSI has to be at least 90 PSI before we start this test. And as you can see, it's still up around 110, 115. We are now going to apply the service brakes. We're going to start our timer, and at this point we have now pressurized our wheel canisters, and we're seeing if there's any leakage there. So 1 minute, and we're looking for a 3 psi drop. So again, we take a look once it's stabilized, once we put our foot on the brake, we're watching those gauges to see if there's any more pressure drop. And if after that minute the pressure falls more than 3 psi, that air loss is too much, we would take the vehicle out of service and have the brakes checked by a qualified mechanic. Okay, we've reached 1 minute. our wheel canisters are still pressurized. There has been no drop in pressure, so we have passed air leakage rate test for his step 6. At this time, I'm going to reapply the parking brake. Okay, for the SFIs in the outreach program, before we get to steps 7 and 8, testing the parking brake and testing the service brake, we want to make sure that the person doing that is authorized by the department chief to actually move that vehicle and do this operation. We don't want to do that without the authorization of the agency supplying the fire apparatus. So step number 7, we're going to be testing the parking brake. At this time, we're going to remove the wheel chocks. We're going to get back in the cab of the apparatus, put the parking brake on, and gently pull against it in low gear to test to see if that parking brake, the spring brakes, are going to hold. So this is an important test to make sure that our parking brake is going to hold. You're going to do that very gently in a safe area, so if the truck does move ahead, you're not going to hit anything. So obviously it's got to be done in a safe area. All right, step number 8, testing the service brakes. We're going to wait for the normal air pressure to build up. We're going to release the parking brake, move the vehicle forward slowly, 5 miles an hour, and apply the brakes firmly using the brake pedal. What we're looking for is any pulling action from one side to the other, unusual feel, or delayed stopping action. This test may show you any concerns you have which you otherwise would not know until you need to use the brakes on the road. So that would be step number 8, testing the service brake.